Last week, Line 6 announced the new Helix Stadium and Helix Stadium XL. And now that the dust has settled a little bit, I want to get into the nitty-gritty and talk about my wish list. A wish list of features that I'd like to see in the Helix Stadium and Helix Stadium XL. Now, of course, this is all speculation, and these are things based on my personal preference, my personal experience with similar units and stuff. Some might be a big deal, some things might not be a big deal, but we're just going to have some fun here, okay? Now, some of my favorite things about the Helix Stadium are, of course, the new Agora amp models. I'm a simple guy. I don't like to use many effects, so my effect chains don't tend to be very big. You know, I tend to use an amp block, a cab block, then maybe some reverb and maybe a stomp box here and there. But that's it. So I'm very excited about the core tones of the unit, mostly. And the quality of the amp modeling, right? And the Agora amp modeling seems very promising. If this indeed is a step up from the old Helix modeling, it's going to be so good. Because I already think that the current Helix modeling is very good and quite accurate. If you don't believe me, check out some of the shootouts that I've done on this channel with real amplifiers versus modelers, in which I included the Helix, and in a lot of cases, the Helix does an amazing job. The fact that there is more DSP is always welcome. How much more DSP? I'm not sure, but I hope we'll definitely be able to load more effects in one single preset. And of course, the new capture or cloning thing, Proxy, has me very excited. It's going to be so cool to capture all my amplifiers and put them inside my stadium and just have my own personal rig in there, just as devices like the Kemper and the Quad Cortex and Tonex and stuff. But then inside of the Helix architecture, which is kind of my favorite, can't wait for that. How accurate will those clones be? That remains to be seen. How long will it take to create one? That also remains to be seen. But yeah, I'm very excited about that. The fact that the stadium has a touchscreen with all those nice graphics, that is so cool. Love to see that. It's just going to make the user experience that much more fun. Kind of like a really high-tech and awesome Game Boy. Love it. And the fact that the stadium is going to have all the stuff from the old Helix in there as well is just so awesome. The fact that those effects and amps are legacy does not mean that they are bad. It's going to be great to have all that stuff in there as well. So even if they are starting with 16 guitar amp models for the Agora stuff, and I think 6 bass amps, you're going to have a huge palette of tones to play with right from the start. I also love the fact that the I/O is going to be expandable. I'm not sure yet how that's going to work. I know that there's going to be this expansion box in which you can connect your Variacs and stuff like that. But I'm really excited about the option of having more I/O added to the Helix Stadium. Anyway, so that's kind of the main stuff that I'm excited for, right? The fact that it has Wi-Fi and stuff like that is also really handy, and that you can put like micro SDs in there so that you can load as many IRs as you like. All of that is really cool. Now let's get on to my wish list. So features that I hope are included in the Helix Stadium. Some of the things that I'm going to mention can be considered as little things, so not a big deal. Other things are a little bit bigger. Let's start with the proxy cloning and capture stuff, which obviously I'm very excited about. First of all, I hope that you'll be able to load multiple clones in one single preset, just as you can do with the Quad Cortex. Now, when you compare the Quad Cortex to the Kemper, I think one of the very powerful features of the Quad Cortex is the fact that you can load many captures into one preset. You can have, for instance, 4 different captures, one of a clean channel, a crunch channel, a rhythm channel, and a lead channel, have them all in one preset and switch between them with the scenes. So basically you can have a 4-channel amplifier cloned inside of one preset for seamless switching and all that stuff. And that's a very, very powerful feature. The Kemper can't touch that at all with 1 capture per preset only. So I definitely hope we'll be able to load as many clones as we want inside of one preset. That would be awesome. Another thing that I'd like to see is the option to turn the cab off when you make a clone of an amp rig with the cab baked in. Now the Kemper, for example, allows you to turn off a cabinet, even if you've baked it inside of your profile, right? So you basically clone a rig with your amplifier connected to a speaker, and then you can turn the speaker off after the fact. You know, it might not be as accurate as making a direct profile with a load box, but it could be a very handy feature if you just feel like the cab isn't working for you for some reason. Maybe they can develop a sort of algorithm that makes that whole thing a little bit more realistic than with the Kemper, for example. Another thing that I'd like to see, which the Quad Cortex doesn't do, is a little bit more advanced tweaking features inside the clone blocks. For example, in the Quad Cortex, you have a 3-band EQ, a gain control, and a level control. I think that's it. Maybe there's a presence control as well. I'm not sure, but I'd love to see at least a presence control and a resonance or depth control. That would be great. But maybe some other stuff as well, like a definition control, which you have in the Kemper, and the clarity control, to adjust the tightness of the tone. In the Kemper, you can use that to make the profile sound closer to the real amp. In this case, hopefully the cloning will be as accurate that you don't really need those controls to get the clone to sound closer to the real thing, but just to have a bit more control over the tone and to fine-tune the amp's response and sound to your own liking. So stuff like that would be quite nice. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it would be cool if you could go a little bit more in-depth there. And especially presence and depth would be great. And I hope that the EQ controls and the gain control in the cloning block or whatever will have enough range. In some devices, the range feels a little bit limited. Now, another thing that I can only dream of that nobody has been able to do so far is the ability to clone effects other than distortion effects and stuff. So maybe modulation and time-based effects and reverb and maybe even pitch effects. Isn't AI smart enough nowadays to analyze audio sources like that? So say if you were to have a dry guitar track and then a modulation track, wouldn't AI be able to sort of take the differences there and analyze what is happening there? Could be cool if Line 6 were able to develop something that could clone modulation and delay and all that stuff as well. Maybe it's a little bit too far-fetched, but technology is advancing so fast that who knows, maybe they can pull something like that off. They would be the first, as far as I know anyway. So that might be cool, but I'm kind of dreaming there. But on the other hand, there are so many good effects in the Helix platform already that I don't think you'd really need that, but could be a cool feature. And they did mention that the cloning proxy thing would be able to do more than just audio related. And I have no idea what they meant there, but that sounds really crazy. Another thing that I'd like to see with the clones is the ability to have various skins for your amp models. That would be so cool. Maybe they could even do a feature where you snap a picture of your amplifier, upload it to a cloud, and then add that to your Proxy Clone so that there's an actual picture of your actual settings with the actual amp on the screen right there. That could be cool. Otherwise, some animated graphics like with ToneX could be fun as well. But if they do allow people to upload pictures of their amps, there better be some filters in there that sort of filter out some things that you don't want to see on your unit, if you know what I mean. Anyway, that's for the clones. That's some stuff that I'd like to see for the Proxy Clone stuff. For the IR block, it would be great if they have higher resolution IRs than they had in the previous units. I think the highest resolution that we have there is 2048, which definitely isn't bad. But since there's going to be more processing power, why not up the resolution of the IRs even more? I'd love that, as I'm a sucker for IRs. And it could also be cool to have a little bit more control over the IRs in the IR block. Some controls perhaps like resonance, so that you can sort of boost the impedance curves a little bit, add a little bit of bottom and top end, scoop the sound a little bit perhaps, maybe something like speaker drive, stuff like that. And I would also love to see a sort of room ambience reverb effect in the IR block, just to add a little bit of room. I usually do that with a reverb block after the IR block, but it could be cool to have that included in the IR block, just as you have with the fractal units and stuff like that, just for easy tweaking and to add a little bit more sort of room easily and quickly inside of the IR block itself, because the IR block in the Helix so far has been quite limited. Another cool thing that I would like to see in the Agora amps, or maybe even in the legacy amps as well, is a little bit of additional controls so that everybody can fine-tune and sort of mod the sound of the amp blocks a little bit just to suit your own needs, instead of having to grab a pedal or an EQ block up front. So the Metallurgy plugin by Line 6, there's this control D-flub or something. I think it's like a tight control. It's probably like a low filter control that filters out the low end before the amplifier. And that can very often help to make an amplifier sound and feel more tight, right? Which is a desired effect for modern styles like modern metal and progressive metal and stuff like that. If we had a control like that baked into the amplifier, you know, when an amp is a little bit too flubby, you go to that control, dial up that control, and boom, the sound is more tight. Just as with my Lichtlarm Audio Prometheus amplifier and the cut control, for example. That would be quite powerful. Now, we don't have to go all in depth like the Fractal stuff with cathode controls and all that stuff that I don't understand because I'm not an amp tech. But if we have like 3 controls like that, so that you can use to fine tune the sound a bit more, maybe have a control where you can like add a gain stage, for example. Similar to the hot mod things where people can add another tube into the preamp, you know, stuff like that, so that you can sort of mod the amp blocks and tweak them a little bit, but in an easy and intuitive way. So deflub could work because that's very straightforward. Everybody knows what that means, right? Or most people would know. Boost or gain stage, just to add more gain if you want it. And I can probably think of 1 or 2 extra controls that could be nice to have to allow you to fine tune the sound just a little bit more than you can do right now. Another little nerdy thing that I'd like to see, but this is very specific, is some additional controls in the wah block. Modelers like the Fractal Audio FM9 and Axe-Fx, they have controls like Q and Drive. Q especially is something that I would like to see in the wah block, just so that you can make your wah a little bit more or less aggressive. Right now, with the current Helix, you can choose the frequency range, which is wonderful. I love that, but that's it, basically. It would be cool if you could sort of enhance the Q to make the sound even more aggressive if you want to, because I like my wah sounds aggressive. Now, some other things that we can only dream about right now would, of course, be Stadium native. All right, how cool would it be to also be able to load your Proxy Clones and use the Agora amp models in your DAW? I mean, I assume that this is going to come eventually because it's just such a powerful feature. I use Helix native all the time in my sessions for a wide variety of things. So we can only hope and dream about that. And of course, something that you've all thought about probably, will there be a Stadium Stomp? That would be cool. Maybe something this big with a little touchscreen, you know, and have all the effects and sounds in there and the ability to load some Proxy Clones as well. Man, that would be so powerful. Like smaller than the Quad Cortex, maybe a little bit bigger than the HX Stomp, with all the new Agora modeling, all the new stuff, aside from some of the bigger features that the XL has, of course, that you won't be able to fit inside such a small unit. But yeah, who wouldn't like to see a Stadium Stomp? That would be so cool. But for now, of course, we can still use our old HX Stomps. Those are still amazing, amazing pedals. And I still recommend them to anybody who's looking for something compact that does it all. The HX Stomp is so hard to beat. Anyway, that's my little list for some things that I'd like to see implemented or added or included in the new Line 6 Helix Stadium and or Helix Stadium XL. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What are some features that you'd like to see them, include in the Helix Stadium? This should be very interesting. I'm going to read all your comments, so be sure to drop a comment. Also, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, as that really helps the channel out. If you want to support this channel, you can buy something like a Line 6 product at my affiliate links for Tolman and Sweetwater. I'd really appreciate that. Or you can get something in my own web store, like an IR pack or a Quad Cortex, Kemper, or Tonex capture pack. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Cheers.